And we are back, folks. Another edition of the Michigan Insider Film Breakdown focused on the offense. And we are coming off of a victory that has been a long time coming for the University of Michigan. Certainly, when you look back at the beginning of the season and you talked about what they are offensively, what their focus is, what their intent is to be as an offense, it all culminated in a dominant victory. You see it on the screen, 42-27, as the Wolverines took down the Buckeyes, much like we predicted they would. Maybe not this margin, but certainly running the football, pounding the rock, being a key and crucial element to Michigan's success. And so I remember my esteemed colleague, co-host, former Michigan offensive coordinator Al Borges saying, "Hey man, they can beat these guys. They can run the football on these guys." Al Borges, we got your graphic up. You see Hassan Haskins, a guy who you've been trumpeting for the last couple of years as a ball player. He showed up and showed out. 5 touchdowns, put his name in the record books against Ohio State. So, Al, how you feeling? You're probably feeling pretty freaking vindicated right now based on what happened. It seemed to line up with everything you've been saying.
Well, Sam, the thing I like about you, you stayed in the foxhole. You stayed in the foxhole, not like some of these other wimps who, when you asked them after Michigan State, said they were, when's basketball start? Okay. That you actually stayed in the foxhole. All right. I will say this: the last couple of days, you've been completely intolerable. Okay. By anybody who's a rational human being. I've been listening to you on the radio, and it gives me a headache. And you give me a headache normally, even when you're not posturing. But when you're posturing, you're impossible. So, but it was pretty much as planned. I mean, and I'm not going to stand here and say I told you so, I told you so, I told you so, but I told you so. I mean, they ran the football at them. Now, I didn't think they could run for 397 yards. Is that right? I thought they could squeak out 170
I
to
thought it was
200.
299 yards, but it might
Yeah,
as well have
whatever.
been
I mean, it
300.
might as well have been 500 because
Right.
I saw notes. They only ran 64 plays, Sam. 64 plays. You talk about efficiency of offense. Ohio State ran 86 plays because they
Yeah.
had to.
Right.
Okay.
Fourth
Because
down
they had to.
conversions in there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, but 64, the most efficient football plays a Michigan team has run in a long time. Okay. Cade McNamara was solid as a rock. He really was. Outside of one ill-advised throw into the middle and the interception, and we can talk about that a little bit, but we'll forgive him for that because his recovery was excellent. He managed the game the way the game needed to be managed, did the things that needed to be done. It's probably redundant and obvious to say that Michigan won the line of scrimmage, and not just on offense, but on
One.
defense too. Both ways. I mean, the
Boy,
score was
expert in understatements there. They
yeah.
dominated the line of scrimmage.
Well,
They destroyed them in the
I
trenches.
got a caveat to that understatement is they may have won the game 42-27, but what did they win the line of scrimmage? About 100-0. Okay, that
Right.
was that wasn't even close. Okay, what was kind of neat is so many things that we talked about came to fruition. Remember, we talked about saved plays that you
Mhm.
didn't run. I don't like calling them saved plays. I just call them locker plays. You stick them in a locker for the big game. You pull them out. They haven't seen them. Well, this was interesting. I went back through the whole video because we've watched every play of every game. Right? I have broken down the coverages, the fronts, how they were blocked, everything in every single football game. So I know the plays they basically run. The novelty plays, the plays that have never been seen in the game by Ohio State until this game, had 131 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Let's cite a couple, which some we will illustrate. The statue, reverse, okay? The flea flicker, which they've run a flea flicker, but not the flea flicker they ran in this game. They hit the halfback on the wheel. Again, that one's something we're going to show later. They ran a counter sweep variation off the counter that scored a 14-yard touchdown where they took the ball outside, although the appearance was a counter play. They ran a wedge pass. They got in wedge formation and threw a ball deep and got a pass interference. for a 15-yard penalty. They put JJ in and ran a little block and go play where Roman Wilson pretended he was going to block. JJ pulled the ball out and threw a ball down the field for a 31-yard gain. They ran a little Q crack force with JJ, which I've never seen before, to put the ball down to the 1-yard line. And they ran a max protect over route to Roman Wilson for a 24-yard gain. Altogether, 131 yards and 2 touchdowns on plays that I saw nowhere on video before.
Mhm.
That is a tribute to the offensive coordinator, okay? He dialed them up right, and he surprised them some. Now, I always thought, now that's a lot. I wouldn't expect 131. I'd say if they get 70 to 80 yards on novelty plays, that's a heck of a game. But to get 131, that's good design. That's good creativity, and that's good timing of calls. So I was impressed by that, and I bet a lot of people didn't even notice that. But going back through the tape, it kind of jumped out to me. As I said, I thought their efficiency was good. 64 plays. I don't even know what the total yards was. To be honest with you, I wasn't interested because all that mattered was that they did what they had to do situationally every time it came up. Whether it was getting a first down on third or fourth and 1, whatever it was. They didn't have a lot of third and longs, so they didn't need to do that much. Right off the top, I always knew when we won or lost the game. If I used all my third and long calls, we probably lost. Well, I don't think Josh used very many of those. They ran 9 counter plays and 1 counter sweep. Okay, they pounded counters. I'd say run it till you puke, and that's what they did. They ran it till they puked. They ran 6 insert zones. They ran 5 wedge plays, all in short yardage or goal line situations. 7 RPOs, but interesting on the RPOs. They only threw 2 RPOs, but some of the RPOs pulled the core out to open up the run. And I think sometimes they weren't even looking at the RPO. I think they just wanted to force Ohio State to play the RPO to pull somebody out of the box, and we'll show that later on.
Yeah, that isn't that what happened on Blake Corum's long run?
I think it did, and I think it also happened on one of Hassan Haskins' runs, which I think we telestrate. So we'll get to that later. 3 split zones. Now that's something's interesting. The split zone, it's kind of faded a little. You notice that it's faded a little bit, and I think not that it's dead. They always use it, but it used to be a more prominent play earlier in the year. But I think as they've evolved, they've gotten more into a counter team. They've taken away a few split zones and added a few counters just because they feel they run that play better, which I think
which I think they do.
And 1 bash run, which you won't even think is a bash run because the end was blocked because the tackle had to collect him.
I didn't know there was a bash run in the game.
When I saw the game, I didn't either. But after I watched the video, I go, that's a bash. It's got all the earmarks of a bash, but the end did not end up free because they moved their front. They did not move their front enough. Okay, I think they did move it some. Now they weren't all, but they didn't move it enough because I think if you look at other Michigan games, the teams that have rose the most hell with Michigan are the movement teams, the return teams, the slant teams, the inside knives, all the stuff that forces the lineman to come off a little slower. But I think in this game, they allowed more stationary targets. And Michigan to get stationary targets is
target practice.
Yes. Yeah. I just think the combination of a great plan by Michigan and a mediocre plan by Ohio State. And I think to close out the summary, they broke their will. And that showed up in the last drive particularly, but even in the second to last drive to a degree. But they broke their will. They just were not playing as hard at the end of the game as they were at the beginning. I think, and again, sometimes you might even make it, well, he looks like he's trying, but I promise you his competitive will was gone, and that was in his mind.
Oh, they quit. They tapped out, Al.
Well, you said that, not me.
They said, mercy. Please stop whooping on my behind. That's what they said. It got so bad, Al, that they started assisting in the behind whooping just to get it over with.
They surrendered.
Over with, Al.
They surrendered the last touchdown. The coach surrendered the last touchdown which was good strategy, which you shouldn't have done. But I think the kids surrendered the second to last touchdown because I think they were out of gas, out of will, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, because I was wondering. So what did he tell them on the touchdown before that? Because they looked the same, Al. they look the same.
I don't know. I'm feeding into your posturing, and I'm going to stop right now.
I'm
But
just saying they look the same. We'll watch the plays. We'll
I
watch the
want to.
last touchdown, and he said, "Okay, let them score." And then we'll watch the touchdown before that where he said, "Don't let them score." It looks the same, people.
Yeah,
And the last point, as we get into the film here, Al, you talk about credit, who they are and what they are. Yeah, you told the story of a conversation you and I had last spring where you were asking about, hey, what are they talking about? And you mentioned, and we were talking about Gaddis, and I said he feels like he didn't run the football enough. They're gonna run the football, even when people think he shouldn't. Run the football because it plays to the strength of the offense. It would have been really easy for him to get caught up in all the misplays that we detailed. You remember all the misplays in the passing game that we detailed early in the season, where this play's open and that play open. We were, I mean, huge swaths of these videos were dedicated to pointing out, man, there are plays being left on the field that people who don't get the benefit of seeing the full field view. They don't know. So they're offering all kind of ridicule at the play caller about the passing game, not knowing that plays are open left and right. What did he do? He settled into what Cade McNamara's comfort zone is. We talked about that last week with the abundance of the bingo crosses, you call them, the crossing routes, short and intermediate stuff, quick hitting rhythm passing game. He got into that heavier. And you know what else he did? I was about to call you out. You know what else he did, Al? He didn't get infatuated with what he was doing in the passing game. He stuck to what he said he was going to do.
mhm.
We're going to run this rock because when it counts, when it matters, when we got to run that ball and we're up 35-27 against Ohio State, we're going to run it down their throats, Al Borges. And what did they do? Ran it down their throats. I think that's a commitment that he made that wound up paying off for Michigan.
There's no doubt. It was a thinking, but it was also a schematic thinking. Because what I think changed the most from when we started evaluating when Josh got here to what they're doing now, they have reduced their RPO game probably twofold. Okay. There were 7 in this game, which is more than they've been running. Okay. They've decided to, here's your decision. I mentioned this to you the other day. Would you rather hand the ball to Hassan Haskins
He did.
against
Yeah.
what might be a semi-loaded box or throw a bubble outside? Are you going to bubble him or are you going to bully him? Where Michigan made their change, they decided to bully him. They got a bubble here. They got a little spot screen there once in a while, but those became few and far between. They got away from spread concepts and into power concepts. That fit their personnel better. Now, in a year or 2 years, it may change, Sam. You may have a quarterback that's slick on all those RPOs, and you may end up throwing 15, 25 RPOs in a game. But for this team, you were better to bully him than to bubble him.
Yeah, that might be
Because,
something they do with JJ, right?
well,
Maybe
sure,
it,
because
yeah.
that's maybe his deal. That might be his deal. It isn't Cade McNamara's deal because it becomes too quarterback dependent. And so this is another game where if they wanted to tag every run with a bubble or an RPO or whatever, they could have thrown the ball 45 times. They could maybe as many as Ohio State did. They'd have lost. They'd have lost because that's not what they're good at. And as long as that kid's the quarterback and they got this stable of backs and these linemen, this is their niche. But it ain't always everything people want it to be. Everybody come back. Well, doggone it, they got to do more +1 running. They're minus numbers. I hear all that. I mean, if you basic math, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that running into 8 guys is probably not as good as running into 7 guys. I mean, we figure that. But for some teams, yes, it is. Yes, it is, because the alternative is something your personnel may not be as good at. So, hats off to those who design the plan and call the plan because they put these kids in their best position to succeed and their best position to complement their defense.